I think it's disgusting what has been happening with short-term rentals, first of all. It's devastating to small businesses, to tourism, to all the people who purchase short-term rentals, who have been able to do them and paid their business license to the city of Kelowna for...
Welcome to The Flow, Real Estate and Money Show, a show focused on helping Canadians understand the different elements of real estate, mortgage, and finance. The goal of our show is to provide Canadians with the tools, information, and knowledge to have more success when it comes to their investing and real estate related decisions going forward. My name is Alex McFadyen, and I'm your host. I can't wait to get you into the flow.
Let's start off with that Revelstoke 2008. 2008, Revelstoke. You just blew my mind. $1,000
per square foot.
Per square foot. And Toronto is crying right now about their square foot prices right now.
Well, I think they're like crying about getting $1,400 a square foot, but I mean...
Well, we're talking $2,008. That's like, I got to look at the numbers right now, but that's probably $1,600, $1,500 a square foot based on inflation.
Yeah, I mean, it was nuts. We accomplished like a massive, massive undertaking there. The interest in that project at the time was like, it was so wild. There was so much press. There was so much hype and so much demand for like resort oriented projects, you know, and I mean, like there was helicopter pads on the lots.
Oh, wait.
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure that like a lot of the lots that were sold with helipads. Like they'd never got actually access from Transport Canada.
Wild.
So they're hooped.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was crazy because I mean, we were only being told what was actually like in our disclosure statement and, you know, how the lot was configured and like every, you know, aspect of how it would be designed and everything else. And yeah, it was a wild time then.
I believe it.
Yeah.
So don't undersell yourself here. In your career, how many like units, condos do you think you've sold?
I would bet, oh my goodness, at least 3,000 or so.
3,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So
personally.
Just a
like not just like the actual like involvement of other the team members and whatnot.
Yeah. So like a village basically. Like we're
I hope
that's a lot. That's a lot of units.
Yeah.
And
like Revelstoke in 1961.
Yeah. Don't age yourself or anything like that. And like so 3,000 units, that's crazy. And more so, how many different developments would you say that is? Like just roughly.
I got my start in 2004.
Okay.
Maybe like 30
different developments.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And obviously you're focused on the Okanagan. So you're in Kelowna and out in Vernon.
Yeah. And
then you said you were in Revelstoke. Have you done any other cool locations like outside of that?
Yeah, we've done, I say we because my husband and I have worked together on lots of different projects too. Oh my gosh, we were at Sun Peaks. We've been at Big White. We've been at Silver Star. We've been in Penticton. We've been in Vernon. We've been in Whistler.
Awesome places to live.
Well, I mean, it's been good. Yeah. I mean, it was great. Like back in the day, like when resort stuff was really resorting. Yeah. If you want to say that.
Yeah.
Those were really great times. If there's anything that I learned along the way, it's that if you can make it in resort real estate, especially in projects, then you can definitely make it in residential.
Right. Okay.
Right. Nobody needs a cottage on the lake.
Right.
You know, with like a boat slip that may or may not happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God. Add a helicopter pad that might show up.
Yeah.
Might not.
Yeah.
I think the important thing is like to qualify you because like initially speaking, well, I mean, nobody knows you, right? So it's not true, but like a lot of people who are watching might not know who the heck is Heather. What's going on? How many 3,000 properties and units, probably way more thousands as a team. You've been all over different places. You focused obviously on, you know, these cottages and different types of things and resorts. And now, you know, obviously you're doing high rises and so forth as well. So you're pretty well qualified to talk about this stuff. That's my point. You know your shit. So I think there's a good point. And so we've entered a new era of pre-sales right now. Before I get into what's happening right now, I think back to Revelstoke 2008 and everything that happened during that and what happened obviously in other places in Alberta as well during that point. And I mean, this isn't the first time that we've seen pre-sale properties get sold and then not be worth the value or be close to that, you know, issues with closing, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like a great example of that. You know, in 2010, that was probably when the Okanagan was at its worst. We had a project lined up, my husband and I, and then I was offered a consulting gig going to Canmore. And like, you know, Canmore isn't really a place that I'd spend any time. It's kind of the place that you stopped to at the bathroom, like when you've left Calgary.
Sure.
You know, but it's beautiful. Like
it's unreal.
It truly is. Like it's so beautiful. The lakes, like the
The hikes, and
mountains, and
yeah.
everything. The sunshine was so fantastic there, but I mean, it is very, very cold. However, I went just to do a consulting gig for, I think it was like maybe 6 weeks, and we ended up really enjoying it. And the thing was, it was a project that had gone into receivership. It had been sold almost purely to like Brits, like, like from like Great Britain, whom had bought during, like the global boom, and then obviously hit the crash. And we were selling it for like pennies on the dollar.
Right.
The development was almost completely finished.
Yeah.
Like, I'm talking like, well, it was finished.
Yeah.
There was some deficiencies that needed to be cleared up. We lived in the resort development for 3 years, and it was wild to see how little they were selling it for based on what it had originally sold for. That being said, that factor of it being almost purely like consumed by foreigners, I think that played a huge part in it, because they were just like, whatever, I don't want any more. Our dollar was like double what the Canadian dollar was at the time.
Yeah.
Right. So it was easy for them to walk away. I think just from their deposits for not closing on them.
What was the original value and the final value
Oh
afterwards?
my God. We were selling it for like $200 a foot.
Okay. And what was the original?
Closer to like 700 a foot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy because it was a stunning development. Just the details, like obviously it was like, timber frame everything. There was ammonite fossils in all of the floors, all of the like the fireplace hearths. It was all cork flooring, just really beautiful details throughout. And the crazy thing is, today it's worth a fortune. And that was only in 2013 that we left.
Yeah.
So, fast forward a decade, and people who held on, they're doing great.
Yeah.
And they're actually also so happy because it allowed short-term rentals.
Yeah. And those properties, in Canmore is just one example of, I'm sure, many different ones that had the same situation happen. I mean, if we think back to like Calgary, there was a series or a time, I think like 2011 through 2014, maybe. I'm trying to remember the dates. I'll have to go reference back, but a similar sort of thing. And so now we're seeing a situation occur. Obviously, global crisis wise is not the case here. We're dealing with a Canadian crisis, and we're dealing with a situation where, well, economically speaking, we're in the pits, and people had as bought a lot of condos on speculation of where the values could go.
Yeah.
So obviously in the news everywhere right now is Toronto, right? $1,500 a square foot, $1,400 a square foot. Nobody's able to close on these things because it doesn't make any sense. Like, same thing, walk away. Like, if I rent this thing, I'm going to end up paying, $2,000 a month cash flow.
Yeah, nobody wants to feed that.
Yeah. Why am I doing that? And and locally speaking, so you're in Kelowna, that's where we're located right now.
Yep.
We're not dealing with the same crisis, right? We're not dealing with those levels, are we, at this point right now?
No, I wouldn't say that. Everybody has their own degree of what a crisis is, but to that degree, like in mass quantities, no, I wouldn't think so. I think there's definitely some people who have gotten in over their heads. I think there's people who have chosen to borrow down payments on pre-sales, and when they purchased their pre-sales in 2020 or 2021, they were at 2% interest, and they're making a few $100 interest payments a month on $100,000, and then all of a sudden it ballooned to $1,200 a month, right?
Sure.
So those people right now, like, they never. I mean, if there's anything I can give to you as a piece of advice for buying a pre-sale, like, don't borrow your deposit, and if you do borrow your deposit, make sure to pay it off before it closes.
Right.
Right.
That's key.
Yeah, it really is key. And like, don't get me wrong, like when you're in a rising market and you're an experienced investor, for sure, like, you might, if you have to borrow a little bit, or even if it's only 10%, but pay it off. Like, make sure that you're positioned so that you can actually, like, not lose your money at the end.
So I'm just genuinely curious, and the reason that we're talking about this Kelowna situation right now is, obviously we see pre-sales coming up in all sorts of cities throughout the country right now. We're seeing them come up in the Fraser Valley, in the Lower Mainland of Vancouver. We're seeing it obviously all over Ontario and so forth. And it's the major cities that are getting a lot of the highlights, specifically Toronto. But Kelowna is unique in the sense that, and we'll talk about short-term rental changes in a little bit here, but there was I would say a large amount of a push for people to buy units here for rentals because it was such a hot spot for either tourism or short terms, and it exploded in a very short period of time since COVID, like absolutely exploded, like a lot of places, like many places, right? But that big change, which we'll talk about right now, which is the short-term rule changes in British Columbia, which took effect May of this year, right?
Yes, yeah.
May of 2024 seems to have taken an impact.
It did. By the way, like, I think it's disgusting what has been happening with short-term rentals. First of all,
Yeah.
it's devastating to small businesses, to tourism, to all the people who purchase short-term rentals, who have been able to do them and paid their business license to the city of Kelowna for as many years as they have. You know what I mean? It's just to take that away when it's all been legit and legal, and then all of a sudden just to have it ripped away. That isn't, in my opinion, fair.
Okay.
Or, I mean, it almost seems criminal. But that aside, that's my opinion. But I will say that like there has definitely been the threat of short-term rental kind of edging away for many years. I mean, in 2018, we sold the Brooklyn Tower. And the city, they said that they were already starting to change the short-term rental rules then. Do you know what I mean? So they were starting to make adjustments with C7, which is like kind of like you were kind of on the cusp of bordering whether you can do short-term or not. It's just up to whether or not you classify the property as that at closing. I will definitely say that, I mean, I'm totally on the owner's side when it comes to whether or not they should have been able to endure doing short-term rentals. Because, of course, like that's how they had been set up. And the city has completely endorsed that in the past. But yeah, I mean, in the last, I mean, right before like like when COVID was happening, there was the last couple of big launches that did permit short-term rentals, and there was really only two though. Really, like it was Aqua and it was Caban.
Okay, so these are two. There's a lot of people probably watching and listening that maybe aren't familiar with either the Okanagan or Kelowna or these units in particular. So let's just briefly touch on Aqua, Caban. What was like the average price point of a unit, a short-term rentals unit, and what was like the draw of these types of?
Yeah, I mean, the first launch of Aqua, I mean, that was a nightly rental building. So it permitted nightly rentals. It was the rear building. You know, it wasn't finished to the same spec as the front two buildings, which were like really more geared towards long-term, or I should say primary residence, even though those two buildings did permit 7-day like weekly rentals, right? Those two buildings were finished in a much higher capacity. Like there's like luxury, everything, probably the highest, well, easily the highest and mission like building that Mission Group has done historically. The first building, which we'll be completing, by the way, this December, I think, that was priced really reasonably.
Yeah.
And I mean, it should allow short-term rentals. It's right in the heart of like the hotel zone with the Eldorado and Mateo, and
So it's right on the lake, right on the water.
well, it's right on the water, but and also that's zone tourist commercial. Like it's always been intended to be
Sure.
short-term rental in that area.
So like, do you have a rough range of like what someone would pay for the average unit there? Or
Yeah, I mean, I sold some units there. I wasn't actually on that launch. I was selling the Movala project, but it sold for, I mean, like it was anywhere between, I'd say like $790 to probably $1,000 a foot.
Okay. So it was up there.
Well,
Not crazy.
No, I wouldn't say that's up there for 2020.
Yeah.
That's like it's lakefront.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like we're in the Lower Mission, and that's an A1 site. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got something like that where it was built, it's going to be complete. And now, of course, a lot of those folks who bought those second phases or second units or whatever you want to call it aren't going to have the short-term rental rules. We've got now a full building. So you mentioned there's an entire building, the Brooklyn. And again, I don't want to assume that everybody knows this. The Brooklyn was a unit that was finished in 2022, I believe, and 2021, if I can recall, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah.
And that entire unit or building, lots of units in there. It was 18 stories, I think, something like that. Or
25 stories.
I was way off. 25 stories and all short-term regulations. So that was I haven't seen anything like that where there was a building, the entire building was short-term allowed. And
yeah, but I mean, the great thing with that building though is that, I mean, this has been the shift, right? Like, I mean, like when I was getting into my career early on in selling pre-sales, when you would do a building that permitted short-term rentals, it had to be a condo hotel, right? So it had to be with a central reservations, front desk. Then you'd pay commercial taxes. If you wanted to rent it personally, you couldn't. It'd have to go through the front desk. Like it was just, there's all this red tape that just makes it and it's also difficult to finance. So difficult to finance. Like nobody wants to touch you. And ultimately because of all that red tape and all those that difficulty, it actually limits like the market value of your home too, right? And it also increases your strata fees because you've got all these like, you know, rental rules, and you've got this rental manager who is going to like put you on a split that might be like 50-50 or 40-60 or whatever it might be. That's just how it works out, right? But the nice thing about how Brooklyn was structured was that it was C7. You could live in it full time.
Right.
If you wanted to. And many people did buy it to live in it full time. Having the flexibility of being able to rent it, you know, as a short-term residence was just a huge perk. I mean, I get it. Like we're in a housing shortage right now for sure. I think with a lot of the properties that are being completed these days and all of the rental projects that are going up, I'm not 100% sure that we're in so much of a housing shortage as we are in an affordability crisis, right? I think there's those two things kind of go part and parcel together to some degree. But yeah, I mean, Brooklyn, it had the benefit of having kind of the best of both worlds. You could live in it, you could short-term rent it. It was centrally located right downtown Kelowna. The strata fees weren't $1 million a month because there wasn't a lot of amenities, and it just, it offered some flexibility.
So that was like in the best case scenario from a short-term perspective. So you had the zoning, you could live there, you could rent it out, you could do all that kind of stuff. And obviously between that and the fact that tourism was ramped up during the COVID years, with being unable to go away, Kelowna just was obviously busy as it was. And then people were sitting there like, where the heck do I put my money, right? And they decided to come here.
Well, it's funny because Brooklyn was launched in 2018. Like that was it was well before COVID. I mean, it was tough. It was tough times during COVID. There wasn't a lot of people traveling. Ironically, there was way more people traveling during COVID than there was right now.
Yeah.
With the short-term rental ban.
Right.
Like, I mean, everyone was told in BC like you're not supposed to travel.
Country, yeah.
Yeah, but at least if they decided to say, weren't going to follow the rules, that they would have some place to stay.
Yeah.
With their kids, if they weren't going to go completely crazy living at home. It's just, I think it's insane the way that the government has overreached, but I think that's another.
Okay, fair enough.
That's
fair
another
enough.
podcast.
Well, no, it's okay. Well, so one of the questions I have for you is, so obviously this has happened. Here we are. This is where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Everywhere in the country is dealing with the same thing. And it's interesting to see how we're still dealing with an affordability crisis, as you pointed out. Well pointed out. I wouldn't disagree with that standpoint. It's still very expensive to get into certain types of properties. And I think for some people getting the marketplace, which we're seeing as somewhat being addressed by some of the new rules and regulations coming out from CMHC and OSFI and the government incentives for first-time buyers, which is obviously good. But we're also now dealing with, not just in Kelowna, but in other cities now, a situation where we've got all these owners who own these short-term rentals, and they got to figure out what the heck to do. And this is kind of old news from that perspective. But that, plus, in addition to that, now we're also dealing with, on top of that, a whole whackload of completions from people who may not have ever wanted to or intended to occupy, or they were going to rent it out. And we're having a whole other world of challenges now, right? So talk to that. Like, first of all, boots on the ground, like, how many of these units are you seeing where people are struggling to close or don't want to close?
I mean, a lot. Okay, so a couple things. So number one, like right now in Kelowna proper, not looking at any other, like not like West Kelowna, we're looking at like in the next 18 months, just shy of 2,000 units.
2,000
to close.
And out of those, now I don't know if you know the stats, you might not, but if you do, tell me, how many of those would you say are owner occupied versus investment?
I don't know. I want to work in this industry still.
Okay, no comment. That says all I need to say. So probably a lot of people are buying them as investments at this point right now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like, I mean, but this is just it. Is that Kelowna is an investor-driven destination and location. It pains me to hear people say, just to like get their pitchforks out and attack the investor. Because the reality is that if we didn't have investors with pre-sale projects, nothing would get built.
That's true.
There would be no housing.
Yep.
But especially in Kelowna.
Yep.
Like you have to keep in mind that the average person in Kelowna, when you consider the average down payment for concrete, it's going to be 20%. For wood frame, generally now, these days, developers who are smart, they're taking 15%. So I mean, let's just take your average $500,000 unit. The people who are going to live in those types of properties, like $750,000 and lower, they don't have $140,000 or even, it's usually $40,000.
Right.
Just sitting on hand, ready to go, to be put into trust and to sit there for 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, those are your 5% down buyers.
Totally,
right.
Exactly. And unfortunately, like, developers here, like, they just don't have the same programs that some of these major, massive, big players have in Vancouver and Toronto, right? So, you're dealing with the reality that we have a housing shortage. We have a massively developing and growing city that where everyone wants to be. So we need investors. We need people to come and buy them. And unfortunately, like, people who buy them to speculate and to flip them.
That's my question, though. So out of all of these units, from that standpoint, like, and you might not know the numbers, but is it very
prevalent?
What's that?
I said I can tell them to you.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to flipping, but it really depends on the property, right? And it depends on timing.
Yeah.
Like nothing has changed in the
Yeah.
world of pre-sale real estate.
Right.
Timing is everything.
Sure.
Like that, and that applies to every aspect of real estate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you bought in Brooklyn on the launch in 2018 and then you assigned it right before it closed,
Yeah.
guess what? You probably made, oh man, like some of the people made like 60%.
Right.
It was huge gains, like massive lifts.
Yeah.
If you bought in 2022 and you're looking to assign right now, like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Stop looking to assign and start, look for financing.
Yeah.
Like this is what's happening right now, is that people need to stop, like people who are considering assigning right now, they need to get their act together. They need to like look in the mirror and say, I need to start focusing on closing.
Yeah. Well, let's talk. You said you have some numbers in mind, right? Like as a percentage of units, how many of these units do you think first and foremost are either A, going to have trouble closing or unable to close? Do you have those numbers?
I wouldn't have those numbers because I work for developers, right? Like I represent
Sure.
the developer's best interests. So I certainly talk to like, prospects and I assist them with their realtors as they they purchase.
So you're assisting.
But I'm like, I exit the transaction at that point. Sometimes, of course, I hear from people, especially if they are in trouble. But like, I mean, there's definitely murmurings. It's just when you're in the pre-sale industry, like I'm often contacted by people who are looking to assign.
Okay, what's the frequency of people right now that are unable to close?
I would say I think unable to close is a really strong word.
Okay.
I would say with there's probably, I bet you there's probably 30% of the people who don't want to close.
Yes.
Who would like to get other contracts.
Okay.
Possibly more.
Yeah.
But those are generally, though, for, I hate to say it, like for short-term rental for properties, because of course, like the intention that they purchase the property has now changed.
Right.
Right.
So
and that is short term though too, right? Like, I mean, like the city, I do believe that the city is going to go back on that.
Yeah.
I don't know how they can't. Like,
right. So your belief is that there's
no one's going to keep staying in the Holiday Inn.
Yeah. So you think that the city is going to be able to convince the province of British Columbia to be able to reverse the rules for these areas?
The city has to only, like, they have to, like, what, a 0.3% vacancy? Yeah. Well, it has to be for 2 years.
Right.
So, I mean, and keep in mind that they're only taking those numbers off of, from what I understand, purpose-built rentals. Like, it's actually like the rental projects that they can actually, mathematically study.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, like many of my rentals, like they wouldn't count.
Right.
Any properties that I own, because that doesn't factor into what they could actually mathematically.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you were to consider what's happening right now, then, so we talked about the short term, you think that the city's going to come back with that. That's really interesting. Curious to hear that. But if we were to look at like what's happening right now within the local development landscape, one of the things that I've noticed as a major trend is that a lot of developers are now starting to switch from purpose-built condos for resale. They're starting to flip-flop now into purpose-built rentals.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. But like, I mean, do you have any understanding as to how many developments are doing this roughly? Like, what's the frequency? Where are you seeing it happening? Do you have any understanding of this?
Well, let's just be honest. Like, developers who are in the business of development and in the business of building, that's all they can do right now.
Okay.
There's no market for pre-sales right now.
Yeah.
Period. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, it's dead out there.
Yeah.
It's a ghost town.
Got it.
It's
so
an
everybody go
apocalypse.
buy a pre-sale right now.
No, and honestly,
or don't.
buy. No, but like, yeah, I disagree with you. Buy a pre-sale in a building that is more than half completed and has maybe 30% of their product like remaining, because there's some deals to be had out there.
Right.
There are some smoking deals to be had
So
out there.
let's talk about a deal. Like, how do you define a deal in a pre-sale situation then?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, you have to be really, really acquainted with the condo market.
Yeah.
Like, know it intimately, honestly.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then you don't know what you're dealing with. Like, and there's so many realtors out there who will be like, oh, like, number one, they'll tell you not to buy it because they want to get the commission tomorrow.
Right. Okay.
Right. So they're thinking to themselves. And second, they just don't know enough about it. Right. There's a project right now in town. It's in an A+ site, and you can get in there for as low as like $650 a foot for concrete, with some of the best amenities I've ever seen in Kelowna. And it's nearly completed. So
what would you say to somebody who's looking at that as opposed to the opportunity to buy something where maybe there's a desperate person trying to assign a unit right now that they bought a few years ago.
Because the thing is with the desperation with assignments is that you're still going to be dealing with someone who bought it in 2021 or 2022. Those are the people who are desperate to assign because that's when all the projects were the last launch.
So it's a higher square footage price.
Well, it's a higher price per square foot, but it's obviously because they bought it at the peak of the market.
Yep.
Right. So then you still have to reimburse them their 20% deposit.
Yep.
Right. Then they're still looking to cover off of like their realtor fees.
Yep.
And don't get me wrong, there are a couple of people out there who are actually like willing to drop their pants and
get some of their money back.
Well, no, like they're actually like willing to say like we'll like they only want half their deposit back.
Yeah.
So like they're willing to take like $80,000 cuts off of like what they paid for originally.
Yeah.
But
wow.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time too, in their minds, it's better for them to do it now and just be done with it as opposed to having to close on it, pay the property transfer tax, pay the GST, and then have to deal with like, okay, like if it doesn't sell in the first month, then we got to tenant it.
Yeah.
Then we've got to, you know what I mean? Like then we're going to be holding it for like, however many years.
Yeah.
I truly think right now, if you speak to, like I said, which is my shameless plug, someone who knows pre-sales and knows the ins and outs and knows what's a good deal and what isn't. I'm an experienced investor myself. Like getting into a pre-sale that doesn't close for another year, rates are going to come down. Things are going to be good.
Yeah.
This is the time when people should be buying.
So what are your thoughts like just genuinely like for people who are out there and a lot of people are looking at the pre-sale market right now and they're just scarred, like straight up. They're just like, they're scarred. They're like, well, I just saw it happen in Toronto. I just saw, some stuff happen here. I see people losing their pants on and money and all over the place, right? Like you hear the murmurings, stuff like that, like a lot of like negativity. And they're like, well, why would I put my money back into that type of market right now? I mean, for me personally, like I try not to get in too much of like, you should do this or you shouldn't do that unless it's like objectively like really bad, like really, really bad. I don't step too far into like telling them what to do as far as what they decide to buy. That's their decision. And honestly, most people don't give a shit what I have to say anyway. So there's that. But the flip side to that is, I've just genuinely sensed from my side of things that a lot of people are just nervous and scared about the idea of getting that market. And my feedback to most people, I don't know what you would say around this, is like the biggest mistake that people are making is they're buying a presale based on the assumption that the value is going to change by the time it completes.
Well, those people shouldn't be buying presales.
Yeah.
Like I'm so sick of people. I mean, my number one rule for buying a presale, honestly, is don't freaking buy it if you don't have the means to close on it.
Yeah.
And again, like this is, I hate to say it, like why I really think that a lot of realtors need to be culled.
Right.
Like people,
YouTube's gonna love this, man. They're gonna love this.
Sorry, I said it.
No, it's okay.
No, honestly, because when you're out there and you're just trying to earn like a commission as opposed to take care of people, and don't get me wrong, people obviously we have to take care of ourselves,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like when you're advising someone or even just allowing them to believe what they want to believe, that they're going to make this massive lift on a presale and not be like cautioned and say, hey, hold on a second here. You know what? Chances are that could happen, but sometimes it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes shit doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And you got to be prepared so that you don't end up like losing the nest egg that you have for your kids' education.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I don't
Yeah.
disagree. I think like just the fact that there are so many people out there who tried to do that and they lost is now pushing things in almost the opposite direction. And so here we are today, and we're in like what I would consider to be, and tell me if I'm wrong here because you know your numbers, right? Is I think we're in like a little bit more of a flat market now when it comes to the condo market, if not declining, particularly in pre-sales. So my question is, what are developers, besides the obvious, are flip-flopping now to rentals? So they're going into purpose-built rentals and saying, screw it. What else are the developers doing right now to basically keep things going? Like, are they going underwater, or like, how are these guys surviving? How are they moving forward?
Are you talking about like locally?
Just genuinely, like anywhere. Like, let's start with like just in mass. Like, what are they doing?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, like to see, at least in Toronto, it seems like they're really trying to kind of go into more getting like massive numbers of people to just invest into purpose-built rental. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the trend, moving away from the whole like mom and pop investor of buying a presale, right? Putting down your deposit, closing on it, renting it, holding it. I think like these days, because of like inflation and just the cost of building and everything, and of real estate, especially in BC, putting down your 20% and then closing on it and cash flowing, that hasn't happened for a while, right? That was like 2019 when that died.
Yeah.
Maybe earlier. But that being said, I would definitely say these days it's people are like, developers are getting creative. They're definitely going towards purpose-built rental because there really isn't that demand for market housing where you can actually hit like a 70-80% pre-sale threshold to get construction financing. I'm not seeing it as much around here, but yes, in bigger city centers, they're moving towards like actually having more of like a real estate investment trust, right? And that's going to yield you as an investor a far smaller portion of what you would get if you do it on your own, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're taking less of a risk, but you have way less control. You know, I wouldn't certainly be in the position that I am financially if I hadn't gone and taken the risks.
Sure.
And bought the pre-sales and closed on them and rented them and, weathered the storm.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like everyone makes decisions on their own part and on their own, like their own motivations and factors on like when they buy or when they sell. I think there's some great opportunity out there right now. And when developers are moving in a different direction, that's when you as an investor, you should be buying shit.
So are you seeing like 100%? Are you seeing right now? What about the resale projects that are going, the pre-sale projects that are going for actual purchase right now? Are you seeing, I guess, two things. One, they start, pre-selling the large, high rises and so forth super early, obviously, because they obviously have to, build up the financing reserve and so forth to make sure the demand's there. The smaller units, the low rises, obviously less so probably. And that's why you see lower deposits on those types of units. Where are we seeing right now a lack? Like what I mean by that is, from my perspective, I'm trying to look at the lagging factors, right? And the lagging indicators. And one of the lagging indicators is like just, projects that are potentially getting started based on all these things that are going on right now. And we're seeing ones that are in, already started or ready to get started. They're flip-flopping, saying, screw it, let's not do the pre-sale, let's go to apartment rentals. But my question to you is, maybe more clearly, how many of these potential pre-sale projects have you seen either A, put on hold, stopped, or not even existing at all anymore? Like, are we seeing a major decline in the amount of building for pre-sales?
Oh yeah, when you consider the cost of launching a building, it's massive, right?
Yeah.
Like like these days, if you really want to launch a project correctly and with grace and elegance, you have to have a massive marketing budget.
So would you say that what's the primary reason that we're not seeing as many people put boots in the ground or shovels in the ground right now? Is it rates? Is it market?
Shovels in the ground come way after the marketing though, right? I mean, like when you consider how a pre-sale project works, it's a massive amount of pro formas, and then of course like working with designers and creative companies and marketing companies and just building a whole like vision, and then actually mobilizing like your sales teams to execute after having built a sales center and invested in a model and worked with creative designers to have color schemes and everything else. Like it's just there's so much before you actually put pen to paper that developers who have been in the game a long time, and trust me, pay attention to the big guys. Pay attention to the guys who have built shit. Because if they're quiet, I hate to say this, like that's a sign that you going and putting a deposit down with some guy who has a piece of land that he's, owned with his dad since 1973, and they have a dream and they've got a little trailer that they've put
very
some
descriptive.
color boards on the fucking wall. I'm just saying, like, that's not the guy that you should be giving your money to.
Yeah. So are we seeing that right now?
Yeah, totally. Like,
okay.
What we're seeing is big developers are not launching projects. They're holding back on launching. Period. Yeah. There's lots of projects that I know that are on on the books in the city. In Kelowna, there's other reasons too, though. Like, I mean, there's now the accessibility rule that has been put into play by the NDP. That says that all brand new buildings need to be 100% wheelchair accessible. That's going to change the footprint from a minimum of 312 square feet in British Columbia to probably close to like 520 to 525.
Wow. Okay.
They're saying that we need housing affordability and that we need to make things cheaper.
Yeah.
Like the policymakers need to start talking to developers.
So let's go back on that for a second. So you just said the minimum square footage of a unit is going to increase from 300 and something
12,
to
to 520.
Interesting. I just saw a unit. We're financing one that's 308 square feet. So I don't know how they're getting away with that. But
interesting. I mean, close thereof.
Yeah. Okay. But that's interesting to know. I didn't know that. I know a lot of our viewers will ask the same question: who the fuck wants to live in a 300 square foot sandbox or anything like that, right? Like, or shoebox.
There's some really nicely designed 300
I've
square
seen
foot
some
shoeboxes.
crazy places. So So I don't disagree with the point that what do we want with affordability, but we also want to increase the size. We got to kind of make a decision. Then the question is, okay, so how do we increase the size, but also increase the affordability of the units? And typically speaking, there's some charges and fees and so forth that we need. There's a lot of charges and fees that we need to kind of dial back on, but that's a pipe dream that we're not going to talk about too much right now. I'm super interested in the fact that just genuinely speaking, right now, there's less people actually getting started on projects. There's less developers interested in starting projects, which is not a surprise to anyone, but that begs the question. So what's the typical lag time for a project? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Or is it totally subjective?
Oh, I think it depends on where it is. It depends on who the developer is. It depends on the height. It depends on the density. I mean, there's so many different factors, right?
Sure. Once approved. If we were to look at like a typical low-rise project.
The city of Kelowna, it's a development-friendly place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, go to Vernon, and it's a cold. It's a hostile environment.
Yeah.
Like it's not as open for business.
So, but I find that interesting, and just in general, because like the whole point of this is that like there's so many units being complete, and there's a lot of them that are either going to be sold or empty or rented at a lower dollar amount, and there's people going to be questioning, what do I do? Where do I go? But the impact of all of this noise that we're talking about right now is going to be felt in 2 to 5 years. Maybe I'll just call it that right now, because there's not going to be nearly as many developments that are going to be built in 2 to 5 years.
What are we going to be experiencing in terms of like?
Yes, where are we going?
Yeah, there's going to be a housing shortage again. Like I mean, like we're having a housing shortage right now, and what's going to happen? This is the exact same thing that happens in the Okanagan. Like it's going to be stop, and then all of a sudden it's going to be like, holy crap, we need to start building.
Okay.
We go in a pattern of, it's like a dam. You know what I mean? Like the dam breaks. The dam broke. I mean. Well, it broke freely in probably 2017 or 2016. And then, of course, it kind of like scaled back a little bit in 2019. We were kind of experiencing a bit of a retraction. And then in 2020, COVID happened. And I think everybody was just expecting everything just to fall apart. Remember CMHC? They were saying that we should expect like a 25% reduction like in market values. Do you recall that?
No, I don't. But that's how long was that?
Well, it was during COVID. Like when
COVID
first started.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were talking 2019 here.
No. In 2020, it was ridiculous. I was just like, get real. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And my point is though is that then of course the dam broke again, and then we built, and right now like we're seeing a retraction, and again like I said before, that's why it's a great time to be buying right now. There's some phenomenal buys out there.
Yeah.
Like phenomenal buys out there. If you know who you're talking to.
Yeah.
We're gonna see a housing shortage again. We're gonna see a big gap. I would estimate in probably 3 years.
Got it. The biggest thing I noticed, and just to kind of end off on a few of these key points, is like, so we talk a lot about condos and high rises and low rises and so forth. The number one thing, and I bring this up to people all the time, that what do we not see getting built right now? Single family homes. Like there's no affordable single family homes.
Yeah.
We're seeing, some townhouse complexes, particularly depending on the cities that you're living in. Every city is different, right? We're seeing a lot of them in the Lower Mainland, Fraser Valley, and so forth. But even then, certain communities are seeing a lack. So there's not really a lot of like family-based housing that's getting built for people who have, like a couple kids or something like that nature. And I think that's a part which is most interesting to me, looking 2 years out from now, is what does that look like in 2 years? Because we say, okay, we have a whole whack load of all these condos that are going to be ready. People are going to be hurting for right now. Maybe we should just close and hang on for a couple of years. There's going to be people who eventually will buy, but we're going to have a whole bunch of the wrong stuff.
Yeah, I love it you say that, because it's these periods where developers really need to go back and sharpen their pencils.
Right.
This is the time when developers like take sites that they've been sitting on for years and years that they bought many years ago. It's kind of like their like little ace in the hole.
Yeah.
And they pull it out and they actually build shit that people want to live in.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I hate to say that sounds kind of like crass and
it's
a little bit cold, but that's just the way it goes. Right.
Okay. My last point or comment on that is like today, who are you seeing buy pre-sales today? Like who's buying pre-sales right now?
Oh, people who are buying pre-sales right now are end users, people who are going to move into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're finding them mostly like downsizers, first-time buyers, or just single people that are making the move? Like, what are you seeing?
If they're going to be buying a pre-sale that still has like a year to go, they're downsizers, 100%. They're looking at concrete that, was before, like it was too far away.
Yeah.
They were unsure about what was going to happen with the market.
Got it.
They didn't know if they were going to die of Crohn's disease, something like that.
Morbid.
No, but honestly, like people That sounds
like
morbid,
that,
but
yeah.
people do say that. Like,
Yeah.
what if my partner dies? So yeah, I mean, that's what we're seeing. Like in one of the sites that I'm very familiar with, they have done, I think it's a number of like sales that are like, 2 million plus, right? Because it's people who actually are going to live in it full time. And then otherwise, first-time home buyers, well, unless like you have a program like where you're like allowing like people to put down 5%, like that's the only time you're actually going to capture a first-time
So
home
few,
buyer.
yeah.
Very, very
And then
few.
are you still seeing a lot of investors or quote unquote investors?
No, because the investor has died.
Yeah.
He's
Wow.
dead.
He's dead.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
All right,
he's-
investors, there's your opportunity right now,
Yeah.
depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, but honestly, the investors, which is it's silly because people are like I mean I hate when people say people are sheep. Like I just expect, like, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But when it does come to real estate, it kind of rings true.
Yeah.
Because when things are good and then things start to like climb,
Yep.
it's when it's when the wave is cresting.
Yeah.
That the people who jump on the train that shouldn't jump on the train at all,
Yeah.
jump on the train.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are expecting to make a freaking fortune off
Yeah.
of their pre-sale. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not buying for the right purposes. They're
Yeah.
buying it because like Sally, who they talked to at the freaking water cooler,
Yeah.
she's claiming that she's already made like 120 grand
Totally.
off of her freaking condo.
Yep.
That's wood frame, that has one fucking window. That's just like the reality of the way that the world that we live in. So I think that right now, if you're an investor and you've got cash, like, and you've held off or you've sold a couple properties, yeah, if you're very selective about jumping on to or like looking at, what's available and what's out there, yeah, I would jump on the few opportunities that make sense. And there are some really, really good ones.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So get your financing shit in order. Don't try and wait to assign the properties, what I'm hearing for you right now. A big one.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if the numbers don't work now, then they're not going to work later. So don't bet on future numbers when you know that the numbers have to work today, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if there's anything I can say to people, it's start looking at your financing right away.
Yeah.
Don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't
yeah.
wait. And honestly, with developers, they're not going to give you, if they give you a closing date, that's the closing date.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get much more of a notice in 30 days. Even if it's a year away, like start looking at it, because even though I know you can't give like, 120 days, like more than 120 days, 20 days notice.
18 months.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's fine. But yeah, exactly. It's just, but people aren't even necessarily even like looking for a rate guarantee. It's just know that you've got things in order so that if you have to sell something, or if you have to get rid of a payment, or if you have to just do something to make yourself look more viable on paper, you've got time to do it, because 30 days doesn't give you a lot of time.
Crazy an investment like that someone would wait until the last 30 days to be able to make that decision. We see it all the time. In fact, I got a call today. 30 days from now, they haven't done anything. I don't know where they stand. Maybe they're fine. Who knows? But at the end of the day, that blows my mind. So, hey, I appreciate you coming down. Thank you so
my
much.
pleasure.
I'll put all the contact details in the show notes. So anybody who wants to reach out to Heather, has any questions to Heather, make sure to do so. She's a lot more fun. Well, not that you're not fun now, but she's a lot of fun. So any question that you have, she's going to have the answer for it. So make sure to ask it. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much, dear.
That was an unreal episode of The Flow. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did on my side right here. If you haven't already done so, make sure to check out all of the incredible resources that we have available. You can find us on Instagram at Flow Mortgage Co. You can find us on our website, getflowmortgage.ca. And of course, don't forget our free first-time homebuyer masterclass that's currently available on our website for anyone who listens to the episodes. And if you loved what you listened here today, the only thing that we ask for is to share this with someone else that you think this could help. And hey, maybe leave us a great review online.